Welcome to Common Sense Wellness with Dr. Gary Martin, the show that helps you take control of your health with clarity, confidence, and practical wisdom. Dr. Gary Martin has spent decades in clinical practice and natural wellness research, discovering that the key to lifelong vitality lies in understanding the body's signals before they become symptoms. Each week, we will explore simple science-backed methods like mineral testing, facial scans, and lifestyle adjustments that help you restore balance from the inside out. You'll also hear from expert guests and real clients who have turned their health challenges into stories of transformation. No gimmicks, no fads, just common sense wellness that works. Now, here's your host, Dr. Gary Martin.
Welcome to Common Sense Wellness. I'm Dr. Gary Martin. For over 50 years, I've helped people understand their health through testing, practical wellness strategies, and holistic approaches. On this show, we explore simple, actionable ways to restore balance, boost energy, and thrive. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Karen Berry, a certified Ayurvedic practitioner, keynote speaker, and founder of the Live Well Ayurveda in Minnesota. Karen's journey with Ayurveda began in the 1990s and has taken her from corporate sales to teaching at the Minnesota Institute of Ayurveda, training the next generation of practitioners. She brings the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda into modern workplaces, empowering leaders, teams, and individuals to tune into their own inner wisdom for lasting health and balance. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. I'm so grateful to be here, and it's so nice to meet you and to be on your podcast, and what an honor for me.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how your journey in Ayurveda began?
Yes. Matter of fact, a friend handed me a book. This is the power of a single book, right? Back in the 90s, and it was entitled Mind, Body, Sport by Dr. John Douillard. And the book was really about getting into the zone. You know, he was into running and working out and all of that. But what he did so masterfully that really impacted my life is that he wove in Ayurveda as the basis for this book. And when I read that book, I saw myself in a way that I've never seen before. I felt like he was writing the book for me. And of course, ultimately, I learned that he was writing about my dosha and how there's some very specific things that you can look for and understand to understand yourself better. And so in that process, I had little kids at home, and my husband was on the road as a professional musician, and it didn't seem like the right thing to do to start studying that at that time. But I picked it up many years later, and it is absolutely the most incredible medicine. I'm so grateful for my studies, for my time with it, and so excited to be able to share it with others because it has a powerful impact on the individual.
So for listeners who may not be familiar with Ayurveda, how would you describe it in plain everyday language? And why do you think this ancient science is so relevant now?
Right, and that's a very good question. So it is relevant now. It is ancient medicine. It's over 5,000 years old. And it is based on the understanding that we are part of nature, much just like the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom. But we don't really think about ourselves as really being made from the same 5 elemental ingredients, if you will. And so what we learned 5,000 years ago that's still applicable today is that it's the small subtleties. It's the small changes. It's the small things about learning about how we fit into this natural world. And then therefore, which foods support us? Which foods aggravate us? Which activities support us? Which activities aggravate us? And so when we learn to tune into what is specifically important for our body type, then we can really start talking about individualized medicine and learning again about those things that support us versus aggravate us.
So you spent time in corporate sales before returning to your true passion. What finally made you take the leap? What did that transition teach you about health and balance?
Well, corporate America has so much to offer. There's so much that you learn about yourself and that you learn about relationships and individuals and the way things work from that corporate perspective But my heart was always based on the alternative medicine, on the natural medicine, on the sort of far left, if you will, initially back in the 90s. That's how I thought about Ayurveda. But I recognize it today as being a very integral part of who we are. And so a friend of mine, again, this is interesting because it was a different friend, but about 15 years ago, he sent me a quote. And the quote was an Ayurvedic quote. And it was just like, oh, now's my time. I got to do it. And so I went back to school. I found out that Minnesota Institute of Ayurveda was here in Minnesota, where there was also the California College in California. And then there was ultimately Ananda Ayurveda in Chicago, where I got my practitioner certification. But it was this coming back. It's like coming home. And so I don't have any regrets with the curve that I made to go into the corporate world because it was so beneficial in many, many ways. But coming back home to that heart, to the things that really matter most to me, the things that have always driven me every morning as I wake up, taking care of my body, understanding that the small things that I do to support myself are really small examples of self-healing. And there's so much power in this self-healing of learning to listen to your body, learning to understand that your cells are always talking to us. And so that inner gut feeling, that small voice that we have deep inside of us is really our body communicating, our mind communicating, our heart communicating with us on many levels to help us tune into taking better care of ourselves.
So it's our stories are so similar. Yeah, the book thing, that's how I got. Somebody handed me a book, and and yeah, it's amazing. So you work with a wide range of people, from individual wellness clients to corporate teams, HR professionals. What are the most common health challenges that you're seeing in people today?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a number, but I would say at the core, digestion. A
Right.
lot of people really suffer, and they suffer in silence. It's digestion isn't something we really talk a lot about. We just think, oh, I ate the wrong foods, or man, I ate too much, or I just feel bloated, I feel uncomfortable. But it's not really part of our everyday dialogue. And yet it is the core, it is the root, it is the absolute essence of health. And so a lot of people suffer from all kinds of different digestive issues. And even talking to our doctors, it's not even that common to bring those things up. Because a lot of times when you get older, well, now they're asking about what your digestion is like. But all through our years of raising families and producing and working, there's just so little discussed about what's going on with our digestion, yet it is the core principle of health.
Yeah, we find the same thing. The part of the urine and saliva test that I've been
Yeah.
teaching for 50 years tests for 7 different things, and two of those 7 things are the urine pH and the saliva pH,
Mhm.
and they must be tested together at the same time, and it has everything to do with digestion.
Mm.
Digestion is either too fast or it's too slow, and then you have to figure out, the rest of the test tells us why. What are they doing? So in assessing someone's constitution, their dosha is central to understanding their health. So can you walk us through how you approach that with a new client and why individualized assessment matters so much?
It's a very good question and a very central aspect of what Ayurveda stands on. And it is that it's this understanding that we are all comprised of the same 5 building blocks as everything else in nature. Ether, which you can just think of as space, ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And at the moment of conception, not the moment of birth, but at the moment of conception, our dosha is formed. And it really is, it was the energy of our mother and the energy of our father coming together to set that dosha, and it never changes. Now, there'll be imbalances throughout any given day, month, year, right? But that dosha was set at that moment of conception. And so, in other words, if we take these 5 elements, some of us will have a greater balance of ether and air, or a predominance of ether and air in our bodies. And so that means we're lighter, we're smaller framed. And the beauty of that is that we have a lot of energy, We have a lot of, the life of the party, you've got a lot of things to say and a lot of desire to create. So very, very creative people have a predominance of ether and air, and we refer to that as the Vata dosha. Now, the individual that has a predominance of fire and water is referred to as a Pitta dosha. And Pitta has an incredible capacity for understanding things and grasping knowledge very quickly. So their cognitive abilities, they've got a lot of fire. So there's a lot of transformation. So they can read something and transform it into knowledge relatively quickly, and then they can convey that knowledge to others very, very quickly, very easily, readily. But when the Pitta individual gets a little frustrated, then that anger is something that they have to deal with, because that has to do with, the liver and the skin and the eyes. These are organs of the Pitta dosha that can get annoyed. And then conversely, then the third dosha is the Kapha dosha. And Kapha has a predominance of water and earth. And so the Kapha dosha tends to have a lot more mass. So they have thicker bones, stronger bones, they have more musculature, and that is an incredible asset in terms of immunity and health. And so their immune system in general, when they're balanced, is very strong. Their physical body is very strong, and then their emotional body is very strong. But kapha, because of all of that earth and water, if they get imbalanced, is generally wanting to slow down, kind of like the mud in the spring. It's slower, the earth is melting, but everything's kind of moving slowly. And so what that translates as is that kapha can therefore have a little more trouble getting off the couch. They're more the classic couch potato. And therefore, then the body tends to add more earth and water, in other words, increase in size. And so we have these three completely different doshas, but all of us are a combination of all three. So every individual has all three doshas, but we have a predominance of one, and then typically, sometimes they can be equal, but typically the secondary dominance would be either, if you're Vata dominant, then either you're going to have a Pitta as your secondary or your Kapha as your secondary, and then you would have the tertiary for the third one that you would have the least amount. And so most people are Vata Pitta, Pitta Vata, they're Pitta Kapha, Kapha Pitta, and so on. And so when I meet with a client, I'm looking for these doshas manifested in their physical body. That's one of the first things, is just you look at their eyes, their hair, their body size. You look at the way that they carry themselves, because all aspects of who we are based on the energies of those doshas. Ultimately, the doshas are energies. And so we're looking for that. And then when we sit down with somebody, we are talking about the things they're challenged by. They're coming to see me for a specific reason. And so if it's coming to see me because they have a lot of acid reflux and GERD, which a lot of people suffer from, then typically that's telling me there's too much heat in the body. And so whether you're Pitta or Kapha or Vata, you can have an imbalance in any one of them. And so you can have too much heat in the body. And so one of the first things we want to do is to cool the physical body down, cool the liver down, cool the eyes down, cool the digestion down, so that we can then start to talk about rebalancing that, so that now the GERD goes away, or the GERD is, and it doesn't happen overnight, but it is very, very doable to turn these challenges around with time, with understanding, with knowledge. And I think that's a really important word in Ayurveda, is knowledge, because it's knowledge about yourself. It's knowledge about your physical structure. It's knowledge about your psychological profile. It's knowledge about your emotional tendencies. And so when we start looking at all of these things and learning about it for ourselves, then we can start recognizing and going, oh, okay, I need to step back because I've said yes to too many things and I'm over involved and I'm really hurting my mind and my emotions and my psychological profile by overextending myself. And of course, then we can take that into, hundreds of different examples.
So this sort of leads into my next question you said your approach encourages people to ask, what if we learn to tune into our inner wisdom first? What does that look like in practice, especially for someone who's been relying on conventional medicine for answers?
Right, right. Well, it is really, boy, nearly an epidemic in our world today that people do not take time to go inward. And this is a generalization, of course, but we're so busy with our external lives that we don't take time to go inward. And as we take time to go inward, you could say that it's taking a walk, you could say it's forest bathing, you could say it's meditation, you could call it prayer. There's many different ways to go inward, but recognizing that carving out time to listen to that still small voice, carving out time to ask questions of ourselves. It's like, well, okay, if I'm not happy in something that I'm doing at work, let's say, well, then what would make me happy? And these are big questions, and a lot of times it's hard to find the answers. But as we spend more time going inward and getting to know who we are from an internal perspective, not from a physical perspective, not from a job perspective, not from an external perspective, but who am I and how am I wired? What's important to me? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? Why am I here? And these types of questions are things that you don't get answers to immediately. But if you can devote 1 or 2 minutes a day to meditation, as an example, to calm your breath and to calm your inner soul, and then you might have an experience after a couple of days, weeks, months, years, depending on the individual, where all of a sudden you get it and your whole body just goes, and you recognize that you can actually go in and change your brain waves on demand. And as we do that, as we move from high beta to alpha, when we step into that alpha world and even beyond, even into theta, we can really start to ask questions of a much greater power, a much greater source of life than ourselves. And it becomes this really profound way, profound method of really going inward to understand ourselves so that we can live a more peaceful life with more focus, more clarity, again, more purpose. And so these are the things that I talk when I'm talking to the corporate world the most about. I don't really go into Ayurveda because it's such a big topic that it needs to be kept in a more simplistic manner, and really to talk about the value of the mind and understanding the power of the mind and how it impacts every single decision that we make. And so it's a very important step in recognizing this gift that we've been given by a much higher, greater power than ourselves. We've been given this tool to learn to access the change in brain waves. And when we find that, discover that, and feel that, wow, wow, the power is amazing. And it really is empowering to make you want to do it more and to dive deeper and learn more about yourself so you can express yourself as you're intended to.
Listening to what you're saying reminds me of, both of us are saying the same thing. We just have two different languages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our language is knowing your memgram, what
Mm-hmm.
you just said. And memgram is basically the plan against your life. Is there a way to find out what the plan against your life is so you can quit resisting it?
Yes.
Because that's where it gets its power. Everybody has a plan for their life. People talk about that actually, but hardly anybody talks about the plan against your life. Plan against my life. What's that? Well, it's what we call your memgram. We can pull that from the urine and saliva tests that we do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very important thing because once you understand who you really are, then you can see, therefore, the plan against your life is to make that as difficult as possible for you to be and do and have that. And it wants you to take all this stuff personal that is resisting you being and doing and having that. Once you understand all that, it's so much easier to just as you say, step back and just understand that it's not personal.
Yeah.
I don't have to buy into this. I don't have to, play this game. Anyway,
Very interesting.
One thing we talk about here at the Biological Immunity Research Institute is that most people are walking around with imbalances that they can't see, they can't feel yet. How does Ayurveda approach early detection or prevention before symptoms appear?
Good question. And it is such an important question in Ayurveda, because when the energies are within our digestive system. So very briefly, the Vata energy resides in the colon. The Pitta energy resides in the small intestine, and the Kapha energy resides in the stomach and other organs as well. But that's the primary home when the doshas are home. And so if we continue to aggravate one of our doshas, then it will start to circulate and we'll feel it when we tune in. It'll be energy that moves into our body that either is high anxiety, and you might even be meeting a friend for lunch, but you're just wound because it's going to be exciting to meet with a girlfriend, right? But it's not healthy to have your nervous system spike just because it's something fun. And that's a signal to us, once you start to understand these techniques, that it's like, okay, just stay calm. You can enjoy it, but you don't have to get like into high beta and find yourself being overly excited. For those that are suffering from not having energy and feeling sluggish, again, that's communication. That's direct communication from ourselves to our body. It's like, look at, I don't even feel like getting out of bed. What's imbalanced? What's wrong? And so then as they start to learn about themselves, they can look at their diet and go, wow, maybe I was eating too much meat and dairy and seed oils and things that really that's so hard for the body to break down, particularly for that kapha individual, that then therefore they just lose energy. And we all want to have great energy. We all want to experience what it feels like to eat a meal at lunch and then actually have energy and feel better for the rest of the day, and where you don't feel so slowed down by your lunch choice that all you want to do is take a nap. And so these are all examples of ultimately tuning into listening to the body, because the body's giving us cues. And those cues are just take awareness. And so when our awareness is increased by understanding how we're wired and what our constitution is, and we start paying attention to the types of food we eat and then how we feel afterwards, some people benefit from a food journal. It's like, wow, I did not feel well after that particular combination of foods, because there's a whole thing about combining foods as well. And so it's like you learn one nugget at a time and you bring that into your life. And then you add another nugget and then another one, because these changes can't be made all at once. And so we just learn about ourselves by paying attention.
As a practitioner, have you ever had a client whose results or health story completely surprised you? Where the root cause wasn't what anyone expected.
Oh, interesting question.
That ever happened?
Yeah, typically we're looking at more surface things, right? Which really have a very traditional pattern. But what will be behind those patterns are usually emotional and related to the heart and related to how they've handled stressors in their life and traumas, if they've had trauma in their life, and their self-thinking, the conversations that they have with themselves. And so if there is an openness in the client, and very often there is, but sometimes there's not, then if that door is open, then we can have conversations about that and take that to another level. And if there's an individual that doesn't want to share something because it's too personal and too difficult, well, then that client just needs time. And you keep working with it, and you keep working with them, and you keep reiterating the importance of that tuning into the body. And if there's willingness to open that up and share with someone, doesn't have to be with the practitioner, but it could be with whomever they're comfortable with. But very often the conversations that start as a physical manifestation of some circumstances and symptoms that are uncomfortable, very often then it goes into something deeper. And when we can go deeper, we usually find the root cause, because it's all about finding the root cause. And so that is the goal in Ayurveda, is to understand that root cause, address that, and then restore balance.
Yeah, root cause is basically what got me into the whole wellness field 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it was growing up on an Iowa farm or develop a certain common sense, and I had no idea where I came from, but I've always been a why guy.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody says, "Oh man, I feel this way," and I'm, and so like the traditional medical approach is, "Oh, you feel that way, I can make that go away." Well, I'm saying, well, why does that person feel that way? In other
Mm-hmm.
words, I'm interested in the first domino,
Mm-hmm.
and so what you were just discussing about traumas and so forth. I don't know whether I think it was in the 80s. It was in the 80s when we learned that your body is your mind made visible.
Mm-hmm.
People get only so well and then they plateau out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, we quantify everything. Everything's numbers. And so people get to 79%, let's say, and that's it. They can't get any better. They don't, nothing to do. And then eventually they'll fall back into their ways and they end up being down into the 60s and 50s again and so on and so forth. So at that point, it was when we realized that, wait a minute, the body is a mind made visible. It's what goes on between the ears that is really driving this whole thing. It's the emotions, it's the past experiences, it's the traumas that everybody has, and so we
Mm-hmm.
developed this thing based on the urine and saliva test that I was telling you about, this memgram chart, which literally is able to calculate what ages the traumas happened. We can even describe the traumas
Mm-hmm.
and then begin to work with them in reverse order because there's only one way to permanently untie a knot, which is in the reverse order in which it was tied. So, work in reverse. So what you're saying is so true. There's many different ways to approach it. My experience is that dealing with things in the exact reverse order in which they happen is the key. But then you have to have a tool that tells you, well, what is that order? Most people are just kind of going with what comes up, and well, that might not be the right order. Anyway, you now teach at the Minnesota Institute of Ayurveda. And what do you want? What do you most want the next generation of wellness practitioners to understand that you feel traditional medical training often misses?
Mm-hmm. It's the
What do you
complex.
want these kids to learn?
Yeah, it's the complexity of the individual and recognizing that one size fits all in medicine doesn't serve us well. And so learning, it's what's so fun about teaching these young men and women and older men and women too that are stepping into wanting to learn about this ancient science is that you start learning about yourself first. And you recognize it. You recognize these concepts within yourself, and it's very exciting. Even when I give presentations on Ayurveda to the corporate world, when they start seeing themselves in what I'm talking about, it's really fun because you think, oh my gosh, and then they start thinking about their family members and their parents and their spouse and their kids and their friends because you can start to spot certain things. And so that's that initial joy of stepping into Ayurveda, but it's the deeper, longer term dive that is so rewarding and so satisfying. And when your clients really, you see them grasping it, it's really exciting and powerful to be involved in. And so it's fun to share that with students. And they first start in with all of their, practice clients and then come back and share those stories with us. And the things that they're learning and the things that they're sharing it's just very exciting. It's fun to see people learn this ancient medicine that still applies in today's world with all the craziness of the modern world, right? But these concepts and principles are still very applicable, and it's fun to share them.
Isn't it wonderful to be doing what you are?
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
so many people just don't. I mean, you and I both are. I mean, I am what I do. I say, I'm going to be 82 this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still doing it because what else would I do? It's, I am what I am. I am what I do. You are what you do. You can just tell it. It's like you're at home.
Mm-hmm.
You're at home.
Mm-hmm.
When you're telling me all about what you know, you, you're at home.
Yes,
So
great way to put it.
if someone listening today is feeling tired or stuck or just off and they don't know where to start, what is one simple common sense first step that you would recommend that they take this week?
Mm. Okay, I love this question. And there are many things in my mind, but one of the first ones that comes to mind is to think about your water consumption. And in particular, note, how are you drinking water? Now, that seems like such a crazy question, but are you filling a huge glass with lots of ice and then just downing that? Or are you sipping on warm water, potentially through your water bottle? You keep warm water in there and then you take a little sip every 10, 15 minutes. Because the difference on your digestive system is profound. So if you think about a campfire, and we want that campfire to just be, nice warm coals and then, a nice burn, but nothing crazy. And we don't want it to keep going out. Well, when we take a big glass of ice water and we pour that into our belly, in essence, it's like pouring that onto your campfire. And it's just going to put that fire out. And so the benefit and the ease and the power of the small sips throughout the day is not only are you not putting your campfire out, your digestive fire out, you're actually providing a little kindling because those warm sips of water actually act as kindling to keep your digestive fire burning at a nice, easy, comfortable place so that by the time you've finished your previous meal, your fire is bubbling and it's ready. And now it's sending signals to the brain, I'm hungry. And when you have real hunger, oh my, how great it is to have real hunger instead of sort of that snacky hunger that just makes you look around the house, trying to open up a fridge or a cupboard and figure out what you feel like eating. It's like that's when you don't want to eat. And so watching your water intake is really powerful. And then also not eating when you're not hungry because we want to rebuild that digestive fire so that true hunger returns. And so you asked for one, I gave you two. But really, if you're not hungry, just hold off or just eat an apple or something really light if you have to get through the afternoon. And you don't want to be eating late at night because it's hard on the body to be digesting when the body wants to be cleansing and detoxifying from the day's activities. So there are many, many things that come to mind, but those would be a couple to think about.
Yeah, I love what you said because, one of the things that we teach is that the number one health problem in America is subclinical dehydration.
Mm-hmm.
And again, our whole thing is numbers, right? So it's like, okay, well, how do you know? How do you know if I'm consuming the right amount of water at the right sequence, the right dosages, and whatever? Well, the urine and saliva tests that we do, 2 of the 7 numbers have to do with your water intake.
Mm.
So, and there's a healing zone for each of these two numbers. And when you got the right amount of water for your body weight and your lifestyle, these numbers are then right where they need to be. And that's how you know. So,
Mm.
yeah, so it's, interesting how much in common we have.
Yeah. And
So,
the data that you have is really wonderful because it's so great to have science behind what you're doing and what you're sharing and what you're talking about, because I think it helps people to open up their minds to these concepts and not be feeling like, well, yeah, how can water affect us that much?
right.
But
I
then you
mean,
start looking at the
some
science.
people feel better right away by increasing the water and doing it in as small doses as possible. Some people don't. And having the feedback, the numbers of the feedback. In other
Hmm.
words, well, I mean, everybody says, oh, yeah, man, I drink a lot of water. I drink more water than I've ever drank before, whatever, and 1.5 to 2.5 on the sugar number is the healing zone number. They come in and they're 4.9, or they're
Mm.
5, they're double. They're double, which means that don't talk to me about the fact that you're consuming that water. You're not. Period. So you've got a way to know, and they would have a way to know if they were testing themselves, which they can also do. So with
Mm.
all your success and speaking and teaching, running a practice, what remains your biggest challenge?
Mm. Well, it seems rather cliche, but time,
Yep. Yep.
time to take as much time as I would like to keep investigating and learning and diving in and understanding everything at a deeper level. And then even from a writing perspective and writing the speeches and working on different material I'm working on is sometimes I just want to remove myself from everything that's going
Yeah.
on and go find that little, that little space that's just mine, that I could be there for a period of time and take my deep dive. But, it's all part of the life journey, and there's so much joy in every challenge, I guess, as well.
Yeah, the thing you just have to remember is that you're never going to know it all, and there's always more to know.
Yeah, yeah, so true.
So, sometimes you have to just step off that treadmill and just, yeah, you're right. So where can our audience go to learn? I'm sure there's, people are listening. Wow, what she's talking about is really interesting. I want to learn more about that.
Yeah.
Where can our audience go to learn more about you and your work?
Well, you can certainly go to my website at liveWellAyurveda.com. And Ayurveda, Ayur, means life, and Veda, Veda, means the science of. And so Ayurveda means the science of life. So you can go to livewellayurveda.com to learn more about Ayurveda, learn more about what my program has to offer. And you can reach out to me via that website, of course, but then you can also go to LinkedIn and message me there. And you can certainly send me an email at Karen Barry, Barry is spelled Barry, at livewellayurveda.com. And so those, I would say, are the best ways to reach me. But you can also connect with me if you just want to have a consult. So a brief 15-minute consult if you want to learn more about Ayurveda as it relates to your situation. And there's no charge for that. That's just to say, is this going to be right for me? And so you can reach out to me in either place. And I'd be happy to schedule something to find out if this is a good fit for you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people that do just that. So
Wonderful.
thank you, Karen Barry, for joining us on Common Sense Wellness. This has been a real joy. And for those of you watching and listening, remember, taking practical steps to understand your health emotionally and physically is how we restore balance, boost energy, and thrive. See you next episode.
Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Common Sense Wellness with Dr. Gary Martin. To learn more about the testing and resources we discussed, or to find out how you can take charge of your own health, visit BIRI.org. You'll find valuable information, free tools, and ways to connect directly with our wellness community. That's BIRI.org. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share the show with someone who's ready to take their next step toward better health.